Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. 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 Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, the sinner. Amen. I'm going to turn down the lights. Not yet, okay, ready to go.
Tell you a couple little stories first. And if you get tired of hearing our woes, that's okay. Just tell me and we'll move on to something else. Anyway, I'm going to skip through a few here. In about 2007, 2008, something like that, one of our parishioners, his wife's grandmother had died, and I went to the funeral down in Southern Illinois just to support them. I didn't know the woman that had died. Apparently she was a pious lady. They called her the little grandma. You heard me pray for her earlier. Anyway, I went to this rural church. It was a fairly new building, but in Greenup, Illinois, if you can find that on the map. It's on Interstate 70. And it was a typical kind of a Baptist-y service. They had 3 hymns picked out that they sang all the verses to, 2 before the homily or the sermon and 1 after. And the preacher there, I can honestly say I didn't care much for his theology, and I tried not to listen because I wasn't there to critique him. I was there to support my parishioners. And I needed something to distract me so I wouldn't pay attention to him. So it had been a long time since I had sang Protestant hymns, and I knew all 3 of these that we were singing. I'd grown up singing the same hymns. But something seemed off. I didn't know what it was, so I pulled out the hymnal and started going through those 3 hymns we were singing, and trying to figure out what was up. And theologically, I think for the most part they were fine. And then it struck me. And I started counting. In 3 hymns, there were over 50 personal pronouns. We don't sing that way. We don't sing I, we don't sing me or my. It's either us or it's about Christ or whatever. It's not about me and my experience in the way we sing in our church. Occasionally it's that way if we read the Psalms, but we don't take them quite that way. So for instance, I'll try to sing this little song. I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses. And skipping ahead. And he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own. That's all fine, but it's about me privately and Jesus. And that's just not the way the Orthodox Church worships. Just as an aside, I discovered that at a funeral. That change that had happened in me that moved me from a private spirituality to a corporate one. And just so you know, we're saved together. We're saved in the body of Christ, the church. It's not just me and Jesus. I may be condemned by myself, but I'm saved together with all of you. So just for what that's worth. In November of 2008, our daughter Sally was pregnant with her daughter Marin, M-A-R-I-N, and was that a miscarriage? Or in utero death? Because she was stillbirth, okay. Well, Marin was the first one, not Celia. Or Aaron, you're saying, was the first. Okay, so she had already miscarried once. This was a stillbirth, Marin. And we did the funeral for an innocent unborn child. It's in the Book of Needs, I think. So a year later, in November, I had been invited to speak at Michigan State University's college ministry. I subbed for a priest friend of mine that Sunday morning nearby. He came and took my place so we could save the box for a visiting priest. And then I drove up to Michigan State. And Linda was at a clergy wives retreat at the Antiochian Village, so we were both a long ways from home. Sometime that evening, or maybe the next morning, I think it was that evening, you said, I got a call from Risa. She's not doing well. She's in the hospital in Minnesota. And neither one of us could get there, so we called her daughter Rachel, said, can you get up there? We'll pay for the plane or whatever it needs, but we can be up there, but we probably can't get there till Tuesday. At the same time, our daughter Sally was having a troubled pregnancy. She was bleeding, and the doctor said, oh, go home, you'll be fine. It turns out that her incision from the previous child, am I saying this right? She had an abruption. She knows all these terms. And anyway, the child was going to be born premature. So meanwhile, I had driven to Detroit to be with a friend who they had just discovered his daughter had brain cancer and probably inoperable. So I spent the night with him, then I drove to Michigan City where our daughter was. We went to the hospital. Linda, I don't remember how you got there. Drove up. So we met in Michigan City at the hospital where our daughter was. The child, Celia, had been moved to a different hospital. Her priest had the presence of mind to baptize her in the hospital, and then she died. The funeral director, who had taken care of Marin before that, and Aaron, or just Marin, had the presence of mind to move Celia back to the hospital where her mother was and we were. So we got to hold this little child before she was prepared for burial. Meanwhile, our daughter is sick in Minneapolis, so we stayed part of the evening, Monday evening, and then we drove to Wisconsin, spent the night with some friends there, got up early, drove on to Minneapolis, getting in Minneapolis about 9 in the morning, I think, on Tuesday. Got in to see our daughter. The doctors told us that she had H1N1, by the way, what they called swine flu. Didn't have anything to do with pigs, but she had contracted that flu. She was 31 years of age, and they weren't initially that concerned. She was in an age group that they didn't think was at that high of risk. There was another man from her church that had the same thing who was farther along in the process, being treated at the same hospital. Anyway, she had had a friend from the church drive her there to the hospital on Sunday morning because she didn't think she could drive herself. We got there on Tuesday, and the doctors told us we're probably going to have to intubate her and put her to sleep to do that, to give her lungs a break. She needs help breathing. So we prayed and talked to her a little bit, and she was obviously afraid. And we innocently said, it's going to be okay, honey. They're taking care of you. And they put her to sleep, intubated her, and that began 2 months of various treatments in the hospital. She was in what was called for a while, she was in an advanced treatment called a rotoprone bed. I don't know if any of you know what that is. It's a bed they strap you into so they can rotate your body and take pressure off your lungs. The older man from her parish that was there at the same hospital was in one of those for a while. They weren't even sure initially they could get one for her because there were only a limited number of those around the Minneapolis area, but they got one. And another part of the story is she had met a young man at our parish. A weekend I had to be gone. He had come and visited with his father, who was my sub that weekend. And he and Risa had hit it off. And so they began corresponding and talking and visiting, and they had decided that he should move to Minneapolis and see if their relationship was going to go on to the next stage of being engaged. So he moved all his stuff to Minneapolis, and he arrived 2 days after they put her to sleep with all his furniture and what have you. Didn't have that much, but. So anyway, we spent the next 2 months with Risa in the hospital. Linda was there the whole time. I went back and forth to Champaign to take care of the church as best I could, when my dean was very helpful in arranging subs when I could not be there. At this church in Minneapolis, it was the St. Mary's OCA Cathedral where our daughter was the choir director. They had a person assigned to take care of needs in the community, and she was our companion all the way through this. Along with the priest there and several other people, became good friends. But as it worked out, we had somebody praying around the clock with Risa for 2 months. Many of the times it was us, but other people from the church came and prayed with us. About a week before her death, they decided that they had done all they could at this hospital. They moved her to the University of Minnesota hospital. They had before that said there's no way we can move her. She's too fragile, but they finally decided we'll try. So they got her to the University of Minnesota, and she lived about another week, I think, after that. She woke up on Christmas Day a little bit and squeezed her mom's hand. One of our good friends who had been with us in the early days in Indianapolis was now living in Minnesota, and she came and stayed with Linda at the hospital quite a bit. And on the day of her death, Janice was in the room and said, and Linda wasn't, and she came out to say, "Linda, you need to come in, she's going to die," or something like that. I don't know, I wasn't there. And Linda said, "I can't do it." And Janice said, "You have to." And Linda went in, said goodbye. You can tell this part of the story better than me. And Risa breathed her last. Through that ordeal, I can honestly say our prayer was that her love would not grow cold. Of course, we wanted her to get better. We wished God's will on that, but that was not our primary aim in all that. It was, let not her love grow cold. Her priest reminded us of a line from Psalm 50, a broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. So I can honestly say, for me at least, that 2 months with her in the hospital was the spiritual high point of my life. I didn't tell you earlier, when our daughter Rachel had lost her husband and told me Christ is risen, I tell people I was not happy. We were not happy, but there was joy that day when she said that to me. Through this whole ordeal with Risa in the hospital, people coming and singing with her in her room, the hospital staff tolerated a lot from us. We sang in her room, we prayed, relics got brought. I was telling someone earlier, Bishop Job, who was visiting at St. Mary's one weekend, came and spent a whole afternoon and evening with us, praying with Risa. I had known him years years before, but anyway, he came for Risa, he didn't come for me. And blessed memory, Bishop Job died a week later, unexpectedly in a parking lot somewhere where he was ministering. That Christmas, when I wasn't with Linda, I was flying home to be with our church on Christmas, and I got snowed in Chicago. The flight to Champaign was canceled. Another priest said he would drive me home the next day, but as a result, I was able to serve Bishop Job's funeral because I was there commensurate with that event. Not that it was a big deal that I was there, but there were lots and lots of priests and several bishops and what have you. Anyway, so we said goodbye to Risa. We did her funeral there in Minneapolis. Because it was old calendar, she died on January 3rd, right? Is that right? Yeah. Because old calendar Christmas was coming up, the cathedral was being used by the old calendarists and us as well, so it delayed her funeral a couple days. Lots of people came. What was most surprising was the impact we had had in our prayers with Risa on the hospital staff at the Unity Hospital. Somewhere between 6 and 10 of the staff showed up for her funeral. And hospital staff don't normally come to patients' funerals. They're not connected, you know, but we had become good friends with some of them in the process, and I think they recognized the nature of Risa's life and our faith and what have you. Anyway, after the funeral there at the cathedral, we arranged to have Risa's body brought back to Champaign where we lived, and they flew the body down, and a friend of ours in the cathedral there, who was also a pilot for the airlines, flew with her so she wouldn't be alone. Then our neighbor, the funeral director in the small town we lived at the time, drove to Indianapolis, picked her up, brought her back. A little later, I'll show you her gravestone. It's not remarkable, but it's hers, so it's important to us. And we'll talk about some of the practical things we can do to deal with our grief, like taking care of flowers and things at the graves. I want to tell you just about a couple of other deaths we've experienced, and then we want to move on to things that we can do, not only to deal with our own grief, but to help others. I went to a funeral, one of those college kids that was, I had an OCF that I had told, you're going to experience a death of someone close to you. Her brother accidentally overdosed in what was called at the time a farm party. Do you know what a farm party is? PHARM. That's a clue. And apparently high school kids were taking pharmaceuticals they could find in their parents' medicine chest and throwing them in a bowl, and then you reach in and get a handful and take it. Well, he had taken the wrong thing and he never woke up. This high school kid, brother of one of our OCF kids, a girl that I had chrismated actually, and went to, the family was Roman Catholic. I went to the funeral as an observer to support the girl from our OCF, and several kids from the OCF went. But the parents didn't want to deal with the grief. They wanted to avoid it as hard as they could. So they arranged to have the body cremated as soon as the funeral was done. It was the strangest thing in my experience to follow the coffin out to the hearse and have it drive away alone. No one going with it. And of course, Elizabeth, the sister, she was willing to talk, but the parents didn't want to talk about it. It was over. He's gone. So that avoidance. And the father got sick shortly after that and has since died. And I think the stress he kept within himself probably contributed to his illness. I don't know that, of course, but it certainly seemed like that. A friend of ours, some good friends, that actually Linda's been doing some additional grief work about another death in their family. We went to the funeral of her brother over at a little rural town in Indiana. And you know, at the funeral, the pastor talked about him liking to fish, and he gets to be with the fishermen in heaven and stuff like that, and everything's okay, and let's celebrate his life. It wasn't a funeral, it was a celebration of life. And then we went to the grave, a few miles away. Everybody's out. And the first thing the pastor says is, David is not here, pointing at the coffin, about to be lowered into the grave. David is not here. Linda looked at me, smart aleck that she is, and she says, then why are we here? That's not our theology either. We believe the body that has been the participant in the sacraments is still connected to us. Even if it decays in the grave, God will resurrect it. And it's our body. It's not somebody else's, it's ours. It's connected to us. It's the vehicle that our soul used in this life to participate in the life in Christ. So our bodies are important to us. And I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. The last, well, two more. Father George Smith, who was retired Indiana State Policeman, was also a priest, subbed for a lot of people. At his death and burial, or funeral in Fort Wayne, then they took him to Holy Door Mission Monastery to bury him. Unlike some places when you get to the cemetery, the people that open the grave are there, maybe the funeral director and whoever you bring with you, so to speak. This was different, to go to a monastery, and all the sisters were there, and the bishop, and people from several churches that he had served. It was quite a different experience. And he has a grave in a place where people are praying for him all the time. That's why they picked that place. You guys have a parish cemetery down here. I don't know if you all plan to use that, but I don't know if we can house all of you. But our parish has a little cemetery that we're slowly building up. People don't have to be buried there, but we certainly go there and pray several times a year. Last one, Father Peter Gilquist. Father Peter became our friend in 76, late 75, something like that. Helped us in our journey, or participated with us in our journey toward orthodoxy. We became Orthodox about the same time. When he finally, he visited our parish several times to help us along the way. I could tell you lots of stories about that, but after he retired, he moved to Bloomington, Indiana, where his son, Peter John, is the priest. And he wanted to help him raise the money to build a church for the parish. They had a building, but they wanted to build a nice church on the same property. That kind of was his goal, and he wanted to finish one more book that he started. And then he got sick with cancer. And about a week before his death, Lynn and I drove over and spent the afternoon with him at the hospital. And at that time, he thought he was still going to be able to go back home. Just a week. And the next day, they decided he started going downhill. They moved him to a hospice center there in Bloomington. And we had our Parish Life Conference in Chicago the last weekend in June. And on Sunday, July 1st, his daughter-in-law, Christina, called me right after liturgy and said, Father James, I think Father Peter's going to die today. You better get down here. So I told Linda, we packed up, we got out of there. I dropped her off in Champaign and kept driving. Only got stopped once on the way. And the policeman saw the vestments hanging in the back. He said, "Father, just slow down, but go on." Well, I told him I was going. A friend of mine was dying. I walked in the hospice center, and Father Peter died right then. So I was able to say the prayers of the parting of the soul from the body with his son, and stuck around to help them make their funeral arrangements. Interesting story about that. We went to it was the next day. We went to the funeral home to talk to them, Father Peter, John, and I. And he said, we want to vest him. You know, I explained that earlier. We want to do his vesting on July the 4th. Not thinking about it being the national holiday. He just said that's to put these things in order. We were going to do service at All Saints in Bloomington and then move his body up to Indianapolis to a big church because we thought for his funeral there would be a lot of people that wanted to come. So we arranged to use Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church in Indianapolis. St. George, our big church, was in the middle of construction, and they were meeting with Holy Trinity for about 8 or 9 months during a critical piece of the construction process. And the lady said at the funeral home said, "That's July 4th. We really can't do it that day." And right then, Peter John got a call. He said, "Excuse me a minute." He walked out, and I told the lady, I said, This funeral is going to be a big deal. You don't want to let this go because we'll find somebody else that'll do it." And he came back in and she said, "I think we can accommodate you." So sometimes it's good to take your pastor with you when you're making those arrangements. Anyway, so we did a service at All Saints, and then we took him up for his funeral at Holy Trinity, then back to Bloomington to bury him. Maybe we'll get a chance to show you his headstone here in a minute. One other incident that was kind of like that, a dear friend of ours in Indianapolis, her mother, who had been a longtime friend, was dying. And we were on our way to visit our daughter. And I knew her mother was sick, and we called as we were getting to Indianapolis and said, "How's she doing?" And she said, "I think she's about to die." So we stopped to see them, and just as we came in the door, she died. So if you call me and I come in the door, it's not my fault. And so we were able to pray those same prayers of the parting of the soul from the body. I say all that because if you have a loved one that's dying, if you're dying, tell your family ahead of time, "I want my priest here." You know, and I know Father's done this service several times, but he can do it a little in advance, but he'd rather do it right then when you breathe your last. At least that's what I prefer. And sometimes that always doesn't work out. If he thinks he's there for the last visit, he'll go ahead and do those prayers probably. But call him. Let him know what's going on. Let your family know ahead of time what your desires are about the repose of your physical remains. Where do you want to be buried? What kind of funeral you want? Especially if you don't have family that's in the church. Let them know you want to be buried out of the church ahead of time, so there's no confusion about that. Decide ahead of time how you're going to pay for the arrangements. You know, if possible, say, "I'd rather gifts be given in my memory to the church or to Right to Life or something that's important to you, some cause, rather than buy flowers." Flowers are fine, but they're gone in the day. You know, these other things can memorialize us in a better way. Anything about any of those you want to talk about? Sorry.
I was thinking about in the photo, the Greek woman,
Oh, yes.
James.
Uh-huh.
Her mother.
Well, what I did there. Linda's brother-in-law's sister's mother, sister-in-law's mother, knew her mom was Orthodox, and her priest was gone, traveling or something, and she died. And I was the only Orthodox priest they knew besides him, so they called and said, would I come do the service? So I said, sure. So I drove down, did the Trisaggian the night before at the visitation. The funeral was the next day. One of her sons said to me after the visitation, well, Father, we've done all that. You don't have to do much tomorrow. I said, excuse me, if you don't want to come, that's your business. But I got called here to do an Orthodox funeral for an Orthodox Christian, and that's what she's going to get. And so I did the whole funeral the next day, and I don't know if he was happy about it or not, but that's what they asked for. You know, that's what I was there to do. And the rest of the family, I think, was thankful. But.
And you said something to the effect of, your mother deserves these prayers. She's Orthodox. She's been Orthodox her whole life, and she deserves these prayers.
Yeah, she deserves these prayers, that's right. So that's the way we pray. And I've done some others like that along the way, that the family was not particularly Orthodox, but they knew that that's what their mother wanted, or their father or whatever, that they had been Orthodox, and that's what they expected. So I want to switch gears here and talk about things that are helpful to us when we lose somebody, things that aren't helpful, and things you can do for other people. So the first thing I'll talk about is at the visitation, and preparing for the visitation. Well, even before that, if someone is dying, at our parish, what we do is we try to be there and start reading the Psalms. If they're not, well, first, even before that, we try to give them communion and hear their last confession. Father and I will do that. And I've had some people that were near death wake up to take communion. I mean, they were alert and they knew what was going on. And pretty shortly after that, like one dear friend of ours, Linda Boyd, at the hour of her death, or just, I guess, the day before, maybe 2 days before, she had been unconscious. I went in and said, Linda, I'd really like to serve you communion one more time. Let's pray and see what happens. So I started praying the prayers for communing the sick, and when we got to the creed, she woke up and said the creed with me. Took communion, crossed herself, kind of feebly, but she crossed herself, and went back to sleep. It was quite amazing. So then, members of our parish and our daughters came and started reading the Psalter around her bed in the hospital, and the hospital will let you stay there all night if that's what's going on. Connected to that too, I had to talk to her husband maybe a couple days before, and I said, John, as we were walking out to the parking lot or something, I said, John, you need to tell Linda it's okay to go. You have to let go, because she's suffering, and you're the one that's not letting go. She's hanging on for you. So you just need to tell her it's okay. So for all of you, I don't know when that point is. Father can help you with that. But sometimes people need to hear that from us, that it's okay. We'll be all right, you know. Be at peace and go with God, you know. That's one thing that happens. Another thing, Linda's looking for her list here. I've got it on the slide, probably. Another thing that sometimes people need to be told is to talk to each other. And I alluded to that earlier. Especially in my time as a hospital chaplain, it's remarkable how many people in the family will not talk to each other and won't talk to the patient, the person that's dying. So they're alone, and the family's alone, and they need to be together. And so one of the things I did a lot with people that weren't my parishioners was, why don't you all talk to each other? Your dad's dying. He knows he's dying. You act like if you don't talk about it, he won't die. He's going to die. Talk to him. Don't be alone. he would benefit by you being willing to talk to him. Work out whatever, if there's things that need to be said, final forgivenesses, do that. But don't be alone in this hour. You need to be together. So you might, if you're the person that's there visiting and you sense that's going on, either ask Father to help you, or you step in there and say, are you guys talking to each other? It seems like you're all alone here. You can help. You can help that. Just be gentle. Just be gentle. We're blowing out candles, Father. I need to do that. So that's something that needs to be done in advance. So talk to your family about what you want your arrangements to be. And there's lots of details. I've got a slide in here somewhere that I can go through a bunch of things. Things like it'd be nice to have a durable healthcare power of attorney established, have a living will, decide who the executive of the estate's going to be concerning your final remains and your decisions. And you can spell all that ahead of time. And in your family, talk about it. Talk about it so that there's no fighting at the end. Let people be at ease. Decide what you're going to do. Decide what kind of coffin you want, if you're comfortable doing that, and where you're going to be buried. What you want, that you want an Orthodox funeral. That's really what you want, that you don't want to be cremated, especially if you don't have any family. The state will do that unless you get that all spelled out ahead of time. Okay? My personal feeling is we prefer not to be embalmed. Sometimes if our body's going to be transported across state lines, it's required by the law. I think we can even push against that. It's also not required, this will be a surprise, that a funeral director has to be the one that picks up your body at the hospital. If you have a durable healthcare power of attorney that specifies all that, and they have to fill out some paper to have a transportation certificate, but they can pick up your body and take it back to your home or to a place at the church to prepare it for burial. It does not have to be in a funeral home.
It depends on the state.
That's right. It depends on the state laws. But just because a funeral director tells you something doesn't necessarily mean that's the law. Okay? And I don't care what you do. You can decide to you make your own decisions about that. I'm just saying, don't let the funeral director push you around because he doesn't know. Or the hospital. Hospitals typically have this all arranged and they don't want the trouble. You can get what you want, especially if you think about it ahead of time and investigate it ahead of time. Maybe your burial society here can do some more work on that subject. Okay, so you made arrangements with your family, talked about it ahead of time. People from the church are going to come pray with you as you approach your death. The Psalms are easy to read. That's the preferred thing. There are other things that can be read, but that's a good thing that can just be passed on to the next person. Maybe talk about our daughters learning to do that at Linda's.
He mentioned earlier about our parishioner and our dear friend Linda, who was dying of cancer. One thing I'll bring up too is when she got sick, we all, we were waiting, and, sorry?
Turn on your microphone.
Oh, okay. Is that better? Okay. When she became ill, it was a very quick decline for her. But, of course, we were all praying for her to be well. And anyway, we had our accident, and our son-in-law died before she did. We were expecting her to be the next funeral. And our daughter Risa, who was in Minneapolis then, came home to sing her funeral. And I remember very clearly after her funeral, we were at the cemetery, and she's actually buried very close to our daughter. But Risa did everything she needed to do. sang. She got through it, helped us all learn how to have a funeral, basically. Anyway, when it was over, Risa turned and walked away in the cemetery. And I was a little concerned. I thought, what is she doing? And then later she said, Mom, that was my time to cry. Because she'd known Linda her whole life. And she kept it all together through the funeral and at the cemetery, but she needed time. And she knew when to cry. She knew that she could let herself cry. Anyway, so what was I supposed to talk about? My kids.
Reading at the hospital.
Reading at the hospital, yes. As Linda was dying, and we knew that it was pretty imminent, Linda had a daughter, Kristen, who is same age as one of our daughters, Susanna. And Susanna, was a mother by then, and so was Kristen. But Susie said, I think I should go and see Kristen. And then our youngest daughter said, yeah, I'll go too. So they came to the hospital with me, and on the way they said, we don't know what to do, Mom. Do we have to go in the room? Those kinds of questions. I said, no, you don't have to, but you'll know what to do. We'll be reading Psalms. All you have to do is jump in there and read Psalms. And they were both still kind of nervous and not sure that they wanted to do that. And we got there, and immediately they went in the room. They were hugging Kristen and John and their other daughter, and they immediately jumped in and took their turns reading. And then we were there for probably 2 hours. And then I decided, well, we should go to give the family, just them, to have their time, because it was obvious, it was close. But on the way home, they were like, thank you, Mom, thank you for pushing us to do that. We're so glad we could be a part of that and share that with the rest of the family. So they have learned through experience and example not to be afraid. What do you want to go to next?
Just talk about things that were helpful and weren't helpful, like at the visitation and things that people said to us.
Okay. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about my background, too.
Yeah.
As you know, I was a chaplain for a while, and I had several little jobs I did. I really got to be a stay-at-home mom. That's what I wanted, and that's what I did. But as the kids got older, it became apparent that we needed a little more money to keep them in what they needed. But so I had different jobs along the way. After Risa's death, I was looking for another job, and I found an ad for a job for a perinatal bereavement coordinator at Carle Hospital. And I was reading the description, and I thought, I can do that. I've been prepared. I can do that. And so I applied for the job. I was one of 60 people that they interviewed, and I was given the job. Now, this particular position was a brand new position in the hospital. And so not only, was it a new job for me, but I was stepping into something that hadn't been done before at this hospital. So initially I thought, I get to do what I want to do and build it the way I want it. And then I thought, I'm not stepping into anyone's footsteps, so really is all falling on me. So anyway, for 10 years, then I built that program and helped families who were going through different types of infant loss. So a lot of my experience is teaching the staff how to care for parents who are losing a child or have, something that has happened. So I trained staff. I worked with families that were losing their children. And I went out and represented the hospital too in other forums to promote our program. So a lot of my experience as in grief and my background with all that we had experienced helped me in my ability to minister to people during that time, and I was able to bring a lot of understanding to that role. Sorry, I'm getting kind of lost. I retired 4 years ago and I haven't done this in a while. So I want to share a few things with you. Go ahead and put, don't you have
I'm
this?
having trouble. I lost the internet connection. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I can't. Well, for some reason I lost it wants to pull it out of there.
I share with you the agony of your grief. The anguish of your heart finds echo in my own. I know I cannot enter all you feel, nor bear with you the burden of your pain. I can but offer what my love does give, the strength of caring, the warmth of one who seeks to understand the silent storms, swept barrenness of so great a loss. This I do in quiet ways, that on your lonely path you may not walk alone. I share that quote for one, I think it expresses so clearly what it is that we try to do, that we want to share with those around us who are suffering. And I think for us, it's very difficult to know. We want to know what to say. We want to know what to do. And sometimes it's just so hard to know because we have this thought that maybe the one thing we say might make it all better for them. And so I encourage you to let that thought go, because there is not one thing you can say or do to make that grief go away. In fact, you don't want to do that. You want that person who's going through that loss to be able to feel that loss and to grieve. Grieving is a healthy part of our lives. And there are a lot of ways to grieve. We share a lot of things in common, but we may experience them a little different in each other because it's very unique, just as we are unique. Sorry. I get so caught up in it, I can't think where I'm going. For us, okay, there are 3 ways to grieve. There is the intuitive person who grieves, and that's the person who really feels it and who cries and really can express what they're going through. Then there's the person who's the worker, and that's the person who, when they're grieving, they're doing something. Like, for instance, my husband remodeled, no, I'm sorry, what did you do? Our bathroom. He remodeled our bathroom. He worked at the grave a lot, planting things, taking care of the grave. And then there's the third person who kind of does both of those. They kind of go back and forth. So I encourage you to recognize that in someone. You know, what is it that they're doing? Do they need to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk? Or do they need someone to come to the cemetery with them and help plant bulbs or make sure that the grave is kept nicely? And a lot of, now the way cemeteries are, it's such a business, and they don't want you to plant things, you know, on there that they have to trim around. And I say, too bad. Because it's, even though you might not do all the mowing and the trimming and all of that stuff, like for instance, we went ahead and planted some bulbs on her grave, and we had flowers on it for quite a while.
And that was permitted there.
And it was permitted, but I know other cemeteries where they just, you know, they say don't plant anything, but you know, there are all of those little things you could plant, like crocus in the spring, that they're not going to invade their space that the cemetery has to clean. Of course, when you have your own cemetery, if someone's buried there that you love, you don't have those same rules. But anyway, so you have people who are either going to feel it and express their feelings, or work it and express what they're feeling that way, or maybe do both. And the one that does both is a little more difficult to know how to help, because you don't know where they're at the time. I want to read another quote to you from Father David Rucker, which we both think really expresses very clearly what it's like to grieve. When we suffer great loss, our sorrow is like a grenade, having gone off in our hearts, blowing shrapnel everywhere, leaving wounds that cannot be healed all at once. To try and remove all the shrapnel at one time would kill you. So you remove one piece at a time, and then wait for another to slowly make its way to the surface, where you then must deal with it and remove it in turn. Sometimes it takes a lifetime and never fully heals, and your heart will never be the same, but the healing does occur nonetheless, if you're willing to deal with the shrapnel as it surfaces. And I really like that picture of something working its way up. When we had the accident, I didn't know it, but I had glass along my hairline and on my neck from the window shattering. And, but my head, you know, I just kept itching, and I just couldn't figure out, you know, what the problem was. And of course, I was pretty limited to my mobility, and I had a thing on a collar on, and anyway, I kept saying, and I said to my sister, I don't know, this is really bugging me. And so she was able to, she said, Linda, there's glass. And so she was picking glass out of my hairline. And it was really kind of several months ago that I would get another piece of glass that needed to come out. So that vision of when your heart is so wounded from a loss, we can't absorb it all at once. That's part of our makeup, of our psyche. You can't face it all at once. And so you have to allow yourself this time to slowly let things come up. And come to the surface, and then let individual things heal. That's how grief is. It can resurface. And We talked about, needing about 500 hours talking. But the studies show that it can take up to 5 years for people to really resolve a loss, one that's somebody so significant to you.
If they don't avoid it.
If they don't avoid it, yeah.
If you avoid it, you'll get sick.
Yeah.
You really do. We've seen it happen with numerous people. We avoid the grief. And grief is not just someone dying, by the way. Other kinds of losses pile up as grief, like you lose a job, a friend moves away. For a pastor, that's a cause of grief when a parishioner moves away that was a key part of the ministry team in the church. Or a dog dies. We had a parishioner a few years ago, had never really experienced any significant loss in his life. He lived out in the country. His dog ran out and got hit by a car.
First dog he'd had.
First dog he'd had, too. Honestly, I wasn't very much help to him because I thought it's just a dog. And I have dogs. I love dogs. But I wasn't very much, I didn't tell him that. I wasn't that clueless. But I wondered, why is he struggling with this so much? But it was the first loss he'd experienced. And then he had a whole series of kind of significant losses that happened after that in his life. His first child was born, and about a year later they discovered he had pretty severe autism. That was a big grief for him. So other things cause us grief, and we have to deal with them the same way. You work through it. You talk about it. And if you're fortunate, you have a community that will talk to you, a pastor. Just find some friends. We helped start a group a few years ago of bereaved parents. And the group is just for people who've lost children, adults, infants, whatever. It's a unique group of people that other people don't understand. Honestly, you can try to, but you won't. You won't get it the same way that somebody that's lost a child understands what's going on for them. Talk about some of the things that trigger.
Well, I wanted to go back a little bit and get a little response from you. There's the big grief, the capital G, where you lose somebody very significant, but I want to talk about the little griefs that we experience through life. So if you could just throw out some ideas you have of things that will cause grief. One was a pet. Can you think of some others? Yeah? Co-workers?
I have two co-workers that I don't know each other,
Uh-huh.
both married and kids.
Okay. Anybody else?
Father was in the first stages of Alzheimer's.
Okay, so you're slowly losing him, yes. Divorce, that's a big one.
We've had that in our family,
We've
too.
had that in our family. Yes, yes. Family abandoning you. That's what you said, right? Okay.
Back there in the back.
Your former spouse alienated you for kids.
What was that?
Your former spouse alienated you for kids.
Oh, ooh. Did everybody hear that? Your former spouse alienating you from your children?
A family member or a very close friend with dementia, Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
Did not die in a number of years, but it was very slow separation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened to me with my dad after the surgery. It can be something as minor as putting a dent in your car or breaking an heirloom plate that you had from your mother or father.
Speaking of cars, a couple of years ago, my almost 20-year-old Honda died. Actually, we were visiting our mission in Washington. The car literally died in the parking lot. It was towed home, and the next day, the tow truck came to take it back over and did it. I cried like in the garage because I had that car. It was a beautiful car. Served me well for almost 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And with all these minor losses, there's all kinds of stress that comes with that too. You may not think of it as a stressful thing, but stress adds up. And one of the things we've discovered is that over time, if you get too many stress points, so to speak, too many things that happen at the same time or in the same part of time, you're going to either have an accident or you're going to get sick if you carry too much stress. So you got to deal with it. You got to deal with it.
Some other real, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah, did you catch that? A move that takes you from, you know, what's...
Especially in the military.
military, yeah, you're moving a lot, yeah. Yeah, yes.
Loss of homes, like fire or
Yeah.
something, and everything in that whole families.
Loss of a job. Yes,
Family members or friends with addictions,
with addictions, oh yes, yeah,
being homeless.
being homeless, yeah. What about, like, one thing we experienced, you know, having 5 daughters? We went through a lot of boyfriends. A lot of boyfriends.
Some of them we liked.
Yeah, a few of them we did like, but going through it with them and helping them process, you know, I remember our youngest one saying, but I do love him, Mom, I want to be with him. And I'm like, you know, he's 17, you're 18. It's, you know, and just talking with her, you know, I just said, this is normal. This is normal that he doesn't know what he wants yet. And so anyway, you know, as I said, we went through a lot of boyfriends. So did you?
Yeah, people, we just recently moved and we have friends back home who, you know, okay, we've moved on and they don't stay in touch. I would love to stay in touch. So that causes stress.
Yeah.
Sure.
Losing an office because of a
Losing an office because
natural
of a
Natural
natural disaster. Wow.
So imagine people of Gaza or the Ukraine. We've got some recent immigrants in our parish from Ukraine. They've literally lost everything. They're starting over. We're trying to be a family to them, but they're grieving what they thought their life would be. I'm sorry.
Back there.
Alienation from cultural heritage.
Yeah.
That is inheritance.
Okay, so my purpose in all of us talking about this is that we can take the time, or you know, you could take the time to look at the different things, small, up to the bigger things that you have lost through your life, and how did you respond? You know, one of the things I have given as an example is, and he kind of alluded to it, but I had this platter, a glass platter, that belonged to my grandmother. And it was that carnival ware. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but I loved that thing. It was so pretty, and we used it for special occasions, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a connection to my grandmother. Well, one of my daughters, I won't name which one, used it to take something to a shower she was going to, and it never came home. And that, I really grieve the loss of that platter. Now, we could easily go and probably find one similar to it or just like it in an antique store, but it wouldn't be the same platter that was my grandmother's. And every time I'm getting ready to serve something, I think, oh, you know. But I don't mention it to her because I don't want her to, you know, keep feeling guilty, a little guilty maybe, but it's, yeah.
I have a scarf that my dad wore, a silk scarf. I had that in 1967,
Uh-huh.
and I still have that.
You still have it.
And every time I see it,
You remember him, yeah.
We just moved from a house we lived in for over 30 years, raised our kids in. Big, big house, built in 1867. Out here that's not old, but in Illinois that's old. And we had to discard a lot of things to move into a little 2-bedroom condo. And kids didn't want a lot of that stuff, and some of it's still packed in the garage, and we may never unpack it, but that was kind of a grief, letting go of all that stuff, not having a wood shop.
Not having a lilac tree.
Yeah.
Through all the talk, listening to everything that everyone has said, one thing I haven't heard was anger.
Oh, yeah, we had it.
How many times has grief turned to anger, whether it's you being angry or somebody directing anger to
Yeah.
you?
And it's a very common thing. And I will venture to say it can be healthy because it's part of that grief process. I'll give you an example. When my father died, there's 4 of us and 4 siblings in my family. This is how anger got expressed among us. I was angry at the motorcycle club because I just felt like they were trying to, they would come and say how wonderful my dad was, what a great guy he was, and that was not my experience. And I really resented it. I was very angry. My brother was mad at the woman who was my dad's girlfriend at the time. And oh boy, he was really angry. But she would go to the cemetery where he was buried next to my mother and leave love letters to him on the grave. My brother just, and I kept saying, Mark, she's just trying to get, he's like, arr. He did not like it at all. My sister Melody was angry at the man who caused the accident. And she knew where he lived, which wasn't far from where we grew up, but she would go in her car and park at the end of the street and just watch his house.
Scowl.
And just, she was stalking him. And it's really, she got over it, she got through it, but when she told me, I was like, no, what are you doing? And then our youngest sister, Mary, was mad at all of us because we were mad. So anger comes out in a lot of different ways. And, Rachel could have been really angry at her dad. I could have been really angry at the doctor who didn't recognize how sick Risa was, just gave her some cough medicine. Didn't give her the flu stuff they were giving. And some people will grab onto that and they stay in that anger for quite a while.
If only. If only. If only he had done this.
Yeah, if only.
If only I had.
Yeah. And most people work their way through that. If you get stuck in that, then that's the problem. And if you get stuck in depression or stuck somewhere along that line of grieving, that's when the problems arise. But all I can say is be as gentle as you can with other people.
And yourself.
And recognize that you're angry. And, sometimes it's not that bad. I mean, you might have really reason to be angry. But don't wallow in it, I guess. Yes.
Were you angry at your father for dying?
No, no.
People
for
are sometimes.
Yeah, no. No, I wasn't angry at him for that. I was angry at him for
Lots of other things.
multiple other things of being raised. And it did take me quite a while to resolve that. I really, I got some counseling and, So it's some things I look at is that we have, for myself, I have scars on my body from having 5 cesareans. And they're not pretty, but they don't hurt, but they're still there. And they remind me, that I had to go through that to have these wonderful kids we had. And so grief is like that. It's a scar on you, and it can still be sensitive, but it still can bring beauty into your life. Does that help? I don't know where to go first.
Back in the back.
Okay.
Yes, I would like to know, what was your relationship with Christ at the time during going through all this grieving, different periods of your life?
Okay.
Did it come and go? Were you angry with the Lord? Were you depressed? What was it like?
Well, when my mother died, I really struggled with where was my faith. I was very naive. I thought, if I really had a strong faith, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be hurting. My faith should be lifting me up. And so that was my first real experience with grief. And I learned a lot through that. And there was one point where I got out of one of the textbooks we had on counseling, on Christian counseling, and I read this chapter about grief, and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to feel this way. So I was able to work through it better. When we had the accident, and I was sharing this with Father, in the hospital, I made a very clear decision. Number one, that I was not going to let this destroy my marriage. Because trust really was broken, in some ways. But I knew that I could just really walk away and be angry at him. But I decided, I am not letting that happen to me. And then the second thing was, I decided I was not going to let my faith falter in this, that I was going to get through this. So it was a very clear decision I made. I was in the hospital, in a hospital bed, and I thought, I'm not going to let this destroy us or destroy me. So, yes, there were times when I was really angry, especially when Risa was ill. It was like, how much do we have to go through? It really, it's just, what more can you ask of us? What we didn't make clear, I don't think, is that, or maybe he did, I'm sorry, but our daughter Sally's baby died, and we had that to grieve, plus my daughter was dying. And I can tell you as a mother, that was the most difficult thing for me to go through, to leave the one daughter with this dead child and go to the other daughter and wonder, is she going to live?
In the process of that, our oldest daughter and I went back for the funeral of the child that was baptized and then died. Linda stayed with Risa through that. So that was hard to leave her alone.
Mm-hmm. Another funeral I couldn't be at.
Another funeral she couldn't be at. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, if that's okay.
I think there was another question over there.
Yeah, whatever.
Was there another question? I'm sorry, did I answer yours? Okay. Wasn't there someone else who, yes?
How would you recognize that someone does not have healthy breathing but rather stepping into depression? And what way would you help that?
Let me think a moment.
Depression manifests itself in lots of ways, and people that haven't been through it may not even realize they're depressed. The first loss of our son-in-law, we experienced a lot of that, so that when Risa died, then after her, we recognized what was going on.
Yeah.
The one death prepared us for the other. When people are depressed, some of that, again, is normal and okay. It's just when they get stuck, that they start thinking cyclically in negative ways. Nothing can fix this. You know, woe is me, I'm the victim all the time. And how to help them beyond that, it can be tough. We need to find some positive things for them to focus on. And that's easier for some people than others. You know, but looking for the positives in your own life, starting to think to how I can glorify God, not why am I in such a bad place. Because we live in a fallen world. Like I said when I started, we're all going to experience loss, and each of us are going to die. How are we going to face that? Are we going to look at that like I pulled out here in the prayers that we'll say here this evening at Vespers, and we say every time we pray, a Christian ending to our life, painless, blameless, peaceful, and a good defense before the judgment seat of Christ. I mean, that's in our prayers all the time. Or when we say the creed, we believe in the resurrection from the dead. It's not Christ's resurrection we're talking about, it's ours. So getting people to turn to their faith that is about the cross, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow in the homily. It's about the cross and the death of Christ, and that's the only way to get to his kingdom, is through death. There is no other way. And so, you know, if we've lost somebody and they're depressed about that, say, you know, this was the only way they could get to be with Christ, and that's much better. You know, it's not that where we're at is not good. There's lots of goodness in this life. But our hope is in the age which is to come. I sometimes start this talk, these series of talks, by thinking about books you like. Think about the books you like. Like, for me, I love C.S. Lewis, everything he's written. I love it. Or St. Ignatius, his letters, or the Martyrdom of Polycarp, or Les Miserables is one of my favorite novels, or whatever. You've got your own books that you like. Most of us think about our lives and the kingdom of heaven as this epilogue, the thing at the end. And that's all wrong. We're only in the introduction part, if that, maybe the title page. And the rest, the eternity of our life, is all that book that's out in front of us. It's hard to think that way, but that is our faith. That eternity is what we hope for. This right now is just a moment. And the scriptures talk about this life that way, that this is but a passing moment. You know.
In response to that, one thing I'd suggest is to keep in mind, you know, we said it takes about 500 hours to talk. Well, who's ticking that off? You know, say, oh, we got an hour down. And also we mentioned that it takes about 5 years to totally.
This is for someone that you're really close to.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, if you have someone who seems to really be struggling with that, stop and think, how long has it been? Has it been a year? I mean, that first year is really difficult. And some people have more trouble the second year because all of the first are behind them. the first birthday they've gone through, the first Christmas they've gone through, the first anniversary of their death they've gone through. And so they don't have those things to hold on to anymore. And so in the second year, it's like, this is what my life is going to be.
And the memory is starting to get a little fuzzy, and that terrifies them.
Yeah.
I won't remember them.
Yeah.
I'll forget.
So just being very, aware of where that person's at in that walk. Has it been a year? Has it been 6 months? For myself and for most of the people I've worked with, they remember the exact time and day. So when it's been a week, I can't believe he's been gone a week. Or 2 weeks, and maybe a month, 2 months. That date comes around, and they might feel very depressed and not even know why, but especially as it goes farther along. I used to call from the middle of October until January, my death march. It was like all of the things we had been through happened during those months. And so I would be depressed a lot. And now it's gotten to where I might think, man, why am I feeling this way? And then if I stop and think about it, it's like, oh yeah, my mother died today, or my mother died during this week. So those anniversaries are very important to people, whether they recognize it or not. So I don't know what the experience is that you're...
I think she had a mom, and her husband died very early in his 30s, and she was left with 3 little children.
Uh-huh.
So she never shared them. She kept it to herself, and 3 years later she became sick with cancer, and then another cancer. She'd been depressed all those years, and never shared the story. She kept it, and she still kept it sick.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very sick too. So I wish I could
Yeah.
give a suggestion to help her.
I wish I had something I could say that would make it, so you know immediately what to
What
do.
was her
with it.
husband's name? Do you know that? Peter? So maybe go sit with her and say, tell me about Peter again. Tell me about your best memory of Peter. Why did you marry him? Share that joy with me. That's what you can do. I want to talk for a minute, if I can, about things you can do and things you can't do, just in general when people first experience a grief. At the visitation, when you come to the church and the body's laying here or at a funeral home, what can you do? Well, men, listen to me carefully. When you go to a visitation, if you don't have a beard, if you're normally clean-shaven, shave before you go. The reason is you're going to rub your face against those grieving people's face, and it's like sandpaper. And one person's not bad, but there might be 200 people in this line. That was Linda's experience with our daughter Risa, is she came home and her face was red and raw from all these men that hugged her and gave her a kiss on the face. So men, shave or grow a beard, one of the two, okay, before you go to the visitation. Along with that, when you're in this line, it's okay to say, I'm sorry, memory eternal, Christ is risen. But what was most helpful to us was when people would share with us a memory that made us know they knew our daughter. Often something we didn't know, like Risa invited me to sing in the youth choir, and I've grown to love the music of the church because of that. Something we didn't know anything about this person and their relationship with our daughter. Or, Risa came and took me to summer camp. Or Risa did this. Risa, she was such a good choir director. She made us want to sing.
A little girl who wasn't in her church but was in one of the other Orthodox churches had been at camp with Risa, and her mother was telling her that Risa was ill and was probably going to die. And the little girl said, "Do you mean Risa?" She remembered her giving them a pitch. So, that I did. I laughed. I was like, wow, what a kid can, what your kids remember.
So do that. If you know something personal about the person, share that. If you don't say things like, they're in a better place. What's wrong with this place? Why wouldn't being with me okay? Don't say that. Don't say, oh, they're an angel now, or they're in heaven, or none of that's helpful. May be true, even some of the things you say may be true.
They're not angels, so.
Yeah, so we're not angels. But think of things that are meaningful, or just, I'm so sorry, or may her memory be blessed. Another thing, especially guys, but women do this too. Don't say, if there's anything I can do. I know you mean that, but it's not helpful. Think of something you can do. Like, I'll be over tomorrow to mow your grass. Or, can I sit at your house during a funeral so that it's not left exposed? People's houses get ransacked and stolen when they're at visitations and funerals because people read the paper that aren't honest, and that thing kind of happens. So find somebody that can do that that's not really connected. It doesn't have to be at the funeral. We had a good friend who was the postmistress in nearby town, and we had known her daughter had grown up with one of ours, and we were good friends. And what she did is she gave us a roll of stamps, or a couple of rolls, I don't remember. So we had something to send out our thank you cards with. Someone else gave us a package of thank you cards.
You can volunteer to help them write their thank you notes.
Yeah. If you're going to take food, which is helpful, take it in containers that don't have to be returned, and write your name and address on it, because they're going to want to send you a thank you. And they don't want the work of having to look up your address. So, name and address, and it doesn't have to be returned. If you've got a burial committee here in the church and they organize that, don't have everybody bring beef stroganoff. One of our daughters became a vegetarian because she was tired of some dish that everybody kept bringing. I'm serious. She's just started eating meat now 10 years later. And she can be a vegetarian, I don't care, but that kind of thing. What else?
I went blank.
Nothing.
Don't feel like you have to do something right away for them. Typically what happens is the funeral's over, and then some family might still be there, and everybody goes home. And then there's the family, or whoever is left, and they might have different business things they have to do, settling estates, etc., getting death certificates and this and that. But it's after 2 weeks, they're pretty much left on their own. And that's when you want to remember. If you're not close to the person, as someone that's in the parish that you didn't know very well, but you can help by remembering the date of their death and sending them a card. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you today.
Or an email.
So there's little things you can do even if you don't know that person very well. But just try to be thoughtful of what might help them. Now, when Jim's father died, one of the things that happened to his mother, which wounded her very deeply. This couple from their church invited her to go to dinner with them. And she accepted, and she was, quite pleased that they thought of her. Well, it turned out that they were in Amway, and they were trying to recruit her to sell Amway. And it hurt her terribly. I mean, it really did, because she was stuck in this presentation, and his father, I don't even remember, it hadn't been very long, but, she felt, she was very wounded by that. So don't do that. But try to invite them out, and especially if it's a widow or a widower, invite them out or invite them over. Just find little things to do that'll help fill their time. But don't be offended if they really just can't, they're not up to it. There were times, especially after an accident, where I just didn't want people around. I wanted to lick my wounds and just have my family around me. So
one of the things we did to get through the time was Risa found this series of television shows, British TV, Jeeves and Wooster. I don't know if any of you have seen Jeeves and Wooster. It's mindless. But we would all get together in the evening and watch a session of Jeeves and Wooster. And it was just comic relief, and we didn't have to think about anything, and we were together for our family, and that was okay. When we were going through all the ordeal of Risa being in the hospital, we were staying at her apartment, and somebody else would go and stay at the hospital so we could have some time, just our family, to be away. So that was good. So Father tells me it's time to take a break, so we'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the services of the church a little bit and how they minister to us and how we interfaced with those things as we went through funerals and memorials and what have you. So, okay? Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Yeah, I lost the internet.
No, I turned it off because I was in the bathroom. Okay.
Now it's on.
Right.
Yeah, you can turn it back on. I mean, because we're done for now. So don't turn it on now.
Okay.
I mean, you don't need it on while we're having it.
Okay.
Just want to make sure it's on.
Okay.